Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. I have really bad news for you. The world is a better place than we think it is. I've written you a little script. Bear with me while I read it. We live in an easily breakable world, but the surprise is this: the making is greater than the breaking. You can see the making outdoing the breaking. You can see productivity, stability, and prosperity in the USA, the EU, China, India, Japan, Australia, and South America. And you can see it increasingly in Africa. Now, that's a stretch of territory that includes 4 billion people. That's more than half the world's population. Yes, there is breakage, and it's hideous. There were tornadoes this week in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, and Colorado. There were riots last week in Baltimore. There were earthquakes on April 25th this year, 2015, in Tibet. There have been demonstrations in Africa's Burundi that have killed, as of today, 14 people. Well, the fact of the matter is, Mother Nature is a bloody bitch. Never trust her. So some of the breakage is in areas where Mother Nature is showing her violent side. Some of the breakage is taking place where oil powers are in conflict, like the Saudis and the Iranians, staging a proxy war, a sock puppet war in Syria and Yemen. That proxy war in Syria, that hidden war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, is deadly. It's killed over 120,000 people, and it's forced 4 million people to flee their homes. 4 million. And the Saudi response to the advance of what appears to be an Iranian proxy army, the guys called the Houthis in Yemen, has been to destroy Yemen's major cities. Imagine that, living in a country where all your major cities have been broken, destroyed, shattered. Meanwhile, some of the breakage is taking place where the armies of Islam are trying to follow Muhammad's orders and take over the world, which is exactly what Muhammad ordered his faithful followers to do nearly 1,400 years ago. And you see that in places like the Muslims of Boko Haram versus the Christians in Nigeria. But guess what? This has been a good week, even in the land of Muslim jihad. The Nigerian army has freed over 700 captives, that's sex slaves, girls, women, and children, people subject to forced rape, that's what we call it, from Nigeria, Boko Haram, in the last week. Here's another positive. Some of the breakage, like the demonstrations in Baltimore and Burundi, are in areas where people want democracy, equality, and justice. Do you know what the Burundians are demonstrating about? Their president, Pierre Nkurunziza, has granted himself the right to a third term in office. The people in the street have demanded that the president leave office after 2 terms. They've demanded that the president obey what they consider to be the Constitution. The president refuses. He's responded by arresting the head of the opposition, clamping down on independent radio stations, shutting down social media, arresting the head of the opposition, and going to register this week as a candidate for his third, quote, election. But the good news is this. The Burundian people feel ready for democracy. And a democracy is what they want. We will see what happens. There's more good news. While you and I, and it doesn't sound like good news at all, it sounds like the very opposite. While you and I weren't looking, China started a charm offensive 10 years ago to win over the nations physically closest to us. The Latin American, South American, Central American countries. The head of China, way back then in 2004, Hu Jintao, took a South American tour of 27 countries, signing trade and security, military agreements. Our press paid almost no attention. That's why you didn't notice it. Today, China is out investing the World Bank and the Inter-American Investment Bank in more than 6 South American countries, including Venezuela, which hates our guts and loves to be aligned with China and Russia and Iran. That's who Venezuela feels close to. In fact, the Houthis, the fucking bastards, if you'll excuse the expression, who are the proxy army for Iran in Yemen, when you interview them, they say, oh, we like countries like Venezuela. Why? Venezuela's anti-American. Venezuela wants to kill the Jews. And that's remember, the Houthi slogan, which they got from their Iranian overlords, is God is great, kill the Americans, death to the Americans, death to Israel, may God curse the Jews, Islam will triumph. That's it. They got it from the Iranians. And they love the Venezuelans. And the Venezuelans apparently love them. Well, China's winning these countries over. It's invested roughly $160 billion. Again, more than the forces of the West, the forces aligned with us. And its current leader, Xi Jinping, toured South America again in 2014, and you didn't notice. It wasn't in our headlines. Why in the world is this good news? Sounds really bad for us. Sounds like a Cold War. Because this is peaceful competition for influence. And that's far preferable to competing violently. Trade and investment are better than war. Meanwhile, over 130,000 refugees, we're getting down to the bottom of my script, so bear with me while my eyes wander way down. Meanwhile, over 130,000 refugees tried to make it into Europe in 2014. Over 130,000, probably more like 160,000. And it looks like the figure will be even higher this year. Why? Because in a world where there is breakage, the European Union is not broken. Europe's nations are stable. And despite a low economic growth rate, the European nations are prosperous. That's why people are coming. As you'd expect from those who love to trounce, bounce, and torture the American spirit, we are told that the refugee crisis in the Mediterranean seas is created by Western foreign policy, the West's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Let's do a little reality check. Last year, nearly half of the migrants rescued in the Mediterranean Sea came from Syria, Eritrea, and Somalia. Those refugees were not shaken from their homes by American and European wars. In fact, the Saudis have been working like crazy for 4 years to involve Europe and the United States in this so-called Syrian civil war, their sock puppet proxy war in Syria. And we've refused. We've stayed out of it. We are now training something like 150 people, and we're just starting. That's nothing, 150 people. Give me a break. So these were not refugees shaken from their homes by American and European wars. And the West has never made war, at least has not made war in Eritrea, probably never, or Somalia, or in Burundi. This is not caused by Western stuff. Topping it off, Americans are the most optimistic they have been about the American economy and their own economic well-being, how they'll do next year and how they've done this year, since just before the Great Recession in 2007. The most optimistic, with good reason. In a fragile world, there are more makers than breakers, far more, and the makers are here. They're in Europe, they're in the United States, and they're in the rapidly westernizing countries like China and India. Let's look at the really big picture. In science, those who worship the first two laws of thermodynamics are particularly worshipful about the second law of thermodynamics. They are big fans of the idea of entropy. They're absolutely certain of it. They believe that all things tend toward randomness, and all things tend toward chaos. They believe that Everything in the cosmos is in the process of falling apart. That's wrong. It's dead wrong. For 13.7 billion years now, the universe has not been falling apart. It has been falling together. The universe has not been tumbling down. The universe has been falling up. The universe has been flying. Which is why this cosmos, if the randomists, if the entropists were right, this universe would be a random soup. Have you noticed that it's not? That's why stars, galaxies, atoms, and you and I are here, because the universe fell up to make us what we are today, and is going to fall up even further in the course of the next 100,000 years, in large part because of the things you and I do. Back to our script. All of this is why we continue evolving, not evolving up, not down. In the world of human affairs, okay, let's grab this. In the world of human affairs, the same rule applies. There is far more making than breaking. That's why we've evolved from primitive tribes to a globalized society. That's why we've evolved from caves to skyscrapers. And that's why we've evolved from stone tools to handheld computers, smartphones, and iPads, entire computers in your palm. This is a cosmos that falls together more than it falls apart. This is a cosmos where the making outdoes the breaking. And you and I have the privilege of participating in the making. This is Howard the Humongous, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make. Or, want to know why? Ask how. And now, we don't have to push the off button, because Cody the videographer is back and he'll do it.